Hi, so today I thought I'd talk a little bit about nervous system regulation, kind of following on from what we were talking about last time with rest. This will be quite a personal journey for me to share this with you, and obviously this is what I want this to be about, and hopefully you can get some insights out of it that might help you. And if you have any questions around this, feel free to reach out and connect. I'd love to hear from you. So this whole video is going to be about my experience of nervous system regulation, where I am, what's led me to get here, and kind of like what I'm doing to kind of keep that nervous system under more regulated, and kind of all the tips and techniques I've got around that, and really how I've got to this stage of realizing that my nervous system was so dysregulated. So the first thing I'd say is that I started kind of I'd been aware that my nervous system was dysregulated for a while. Just some of the sensations, like feeling constantly under threat. So like I was always in the state of anxiety and feeling like that a lot. Getting sick all the time, going into the burnout like I've talked about previously. So I was like in full-on burnout mode. Didn't really want to get out of bed, didn't have enthusiasm for anything. So emotionally I was a very low ebb. I was like everything was on a hair trigger, so I would get very reactive very quickly. So I knew my nervous system was kind of out of whack. But then recently I've been working on in a group which is called Identity Alchemy with AI, and I will drop the link for that. And that's been a kind of revelation, because I've been working on my identity, working on who I am. And one of the things that I've really been working on is my nervous system regulation. And sometimes just actually talking about that, bringing it up into the light, can have a huge impact on how you actually then respond to things going forward. But one of the things I was really feeling as well was this like sense of being full up, like I was completely full. So anything like a small stress on a day-to-day thing would just send me over the edge, because I just couldn't cope with what was happening. And then I was sick and I was tired and I was exhausted and I was living on the edge of my nerves basically. And when you're full up like that, it just becomes impossible to manage life. So that's where I was. Now, how did I get there basically? And I had spent quite a lot of time where I did feel like my nervous system was regulated. But when I look back, I realise a lot of this is down to childhood trauma. And part of that comes from a dissociation of feelings, emotions, and also the body. So I was doing yoga in the past a lot, and I learned to connect to that a lot. But then I had my son, and I kind of dropped the yoga spiritual connection as much. And so I wasn't really doing that. I wasn't really listening to my body. I wasn't listening to my emotions, and I wasn't connecting. And part of that is a pattern from childhood. And I think having a child has triggered lots of the things from my childhood, because it's coming up. All the things that I want to protect him from are now there. So all the fears I had as a child that I could put down, ignore, and get on with life, they're now there. Because I'm like, what if this happens? What if that happens? And all of the things that could happen to my son that maybe happened to me that scare me, and then other things that didn't happen to me but that might have happened, and then they're all there, and then it's all kind of like there anyway. So that stuff has brought the nervous system dysregulation up. But I would say one of the things that I learned through life is that I didn't learn how to regulate my nervous system properly. I learned how to cope with dysregulation. And I think that's a big thing to understand. And a lot of us do this when we've suffered from trauma and we develop our coping patterns and our coping mechanisms. They aren't actually about calming and regulating the nervous system. They're about surviving life with a dysregulated nervous system. So it's about understanding the difference between what is genuine dysregulation and what is genuine regulation, and what is actually finding a way around regulation. And so that's something that I've been working on quite a lot. And a lot of that has come from connecting with my body. So that's doing like the energy work and the breathing and becoming aware of the physical sensations, because I was disconnected from that. So when I was really tired, even though I was feeling tired, and I wouldn't really feel the tiredness until I was like exhausted, or I wouldn't really feel hunger until I was really hungry, or I'd feel hungry all the time. And I wasn't really listening to what was happening in my body. And so I was I was acting out here and my body was here, and they were not connecting. So I'm working quite a lot on learning to connect with the feelings that are happening in my body, the sensations that are there, and connect with that. Now, in the past, I go back a long time ago, I did TRE, and they're trauma release exercises basically, and it's where you make yourself shake. Now, excuse me, this goes back to when, if you look at animals, and this is where the theory came from, when an animal goes through the fight or flight response, they have the scare, they stop, and then they shake and they shake. And actually, one of the things you'll notice if you look at young children, when they have something scary happen to them, their natural instinct is to shake. And as humans, and we notice that and we think, oh, that's a bit weird, we actually kind of take the shaking away. We teach our children not to shake, so they never shake off that trauma. And what happens is then that kind of gets stored in the body. And the more trauma you experience, the more you hold in your body. But one of the things I would say is that doing TRE, I found it very difficult because I was releasing too much emotion and trauma. And it was like my nervous system couldn't actually cope with what I was releasing. So it all becomes a balancing act when you're doing these kind of things, is learning how to release the trauma from the body without releasing so much that it overwhelms you and almost re-traumatizes you. And that becomes a huge kind of like personal journey to work out where you are. And so then it's about learning to develop lots of techniques to regulate the nervous system around releasing the trauma at the same time as well. So it's having to get those two things working together, so then you can basically get through it. Now for me, I'm becoming more aware of what triggers me to get dysregulated. So like I said, anything around my son, any fears around my son, they load my stress up. So I'm put in the fight or flight when I start thinking about things. Also about my need to be productive. So I went through a phase, and I'm learning to move beyond this, where I was thinking, if I'm not being productive, I'm not being successful. And I've been teaching myself to take a step back, to slow down, and to redefine what success really means to me, because success doesn't necessarily mean productive output. And that's been something to work on. And then emotionally, it's about teaching myself to feel emotionally safe. Being vulnerable with people has always been a struggle with me. I've always been wildly independent and self-sufficient, and not really felt the need to share how I really feel with anybody. And that's another thing that I'm learning, is how to feel emotionally safe enough to be able to share and to connect on a deeper level. And that's all going to help to regulate my nervous system. And so these are all the little things that I become aware of. Now, I don't know about you, maybe some of these things are there for you. Maybe your nervous system, I should say, it's working in a different way. It's showing you different things, because we all have different patterns. But if you can become aware of what your patterns are, of where you are dysregulating, of where you're holding on to the stress, of where you're putting yourself into the fight or flight response when you don't need to be, and you're staying there, you can then learn to bring that down and start to be much calmer on a day-to-day basis, so that when a stress does happen, like a real stress, then you're not at that level, so you can't cope with it. You're kind of down here. It will take you up, and then you learn to bring yourself back down again. And we will live our lives like this, up and down, up and down, up and down. But when we know how to bring ourselves down from the stress, and we bring ourselves down, we spend more of our lives kind of like down here. And that's where I'm trying to spend more of my time now. So I thought what I'd also do is share with you some of the practices that I'm putting into place to help me. So meditation is something I've always done, always, for a very long time. But I'm becoming increasingly aware that my quality of meditation is actually quite poor. And so what I'm doing in this whole system is trying to deepen my meditation and make it more mindful and more beneficial to me. I use EFT tapping a lot, because I find that helps when the anxiety is high, it helps to bring it down very, very quickly. And when I'm kind of need to pick me up, and a good time to do this in the morning is to listen to spiritual text or an uplifting text, or something that's going to make you feel good, something that's positive, because that's like feeding your mind with the positive energy. And it does actually work. I found that if I'm, say, getting involved in watching things or reading things with lots of high energy, high anxiety and emotional stuff, that will affect my state of mind. Whereas if I read uplifting books that are positive and they're engaging, that will tend to lift my vibration and make me feel better. And so that can have a massive impact. And allowing myself to rest, actually saying, it's okay to switch off, it's okay to stop. That's another thing that really helps bring the nervous system down. Doing more yoga, so connecting with my body more and developing those skills of what's happening in my body, how is my body feeling, learning to breathe deeply again and getting all of those things back in place where my body actually is recovering properly. And then one of the things that I find often can help is to shift states. And this can be seen as a negative if you do it, we'll say like alcoholics might use drinking to shift their state. That's not a positive way of doing it. But for me, it'd be something like, if I'm not feeling that great, if I go to my allotment and I do a bit of gardening and I ground myself, especially if my mind is caught in a negative loop, and I ground myself in the gardening and the earth and being in that kind of really natural state, that will help to bring my nervous system back down as well. So it's learning what of those things work for you that help to bring you back into that kind of balance that you can do more of, that you can fit into your day, and not saying, oh, I'm not going to do this because I don't have time. Because when you start doing that, and this is one of the things that I've done in the past, I don't have time for that, I don't have time for that. But actually, when I don't have time for that, I don't have time for anything, because my nervous system can't cope with anything. And so I'm not actually able to do what I could normally do. But when I take a little bit of time to do the regulating activities, I can then use that to bring my nervous system down, and then I actually achieve more by doing that. So it's actually a time saver rather than a time user, is one of the things I found. So one of the things that you might need to be aware of, and that I've been dealing with, is when you do start regulating your nervous system, and you start to bring yourself down into more quiet, into a different space, you actually allow those emotions that you've been suppressing, that your nervous system has been covering up, to come to the surface. And so you may notice yourself feeling different emotions, and it may be uncomfortable, but once you feel them and you acknowledge them and you notice they're there, it allows them to pass through a lot more quickly. And so you're not pressing them down, you're releasing them out. And so we start to do the opposite. We start to release those emotions out rather than bringing them down. And the more I regulate, and hopefully this will be the same for you, the more space there is for things like joy and connection and peace. And that makes a huge difference to your life, to my life, to everybody's life, when we start to live from that place of joy and peace. So I'm hoping that some of this that I've shared has been beneficial to you, to see how you're not the only person who suffers with regulating your nervous system, and that we're all on this kind of lifelong journey to develop the skills that we need to get the nervous system under control and to release the trauma that we're holding in our bodies, to gradually release that, and to continue to open it up, to release the well, because we'll add stuff in there. Even if it's small traumas, we'll be adding things in, and we need to learn to constantly be releasing and letting things go. So we're bringing our nervous system down to that baseline where it's much healthier and much safer. We feel safe within ourselves. So I'd like you to, if you want to share anything about your journey, please do that below. Add a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel so you can stay in touch with what's happening. And also I'd like to extend an invitation to you to join the Sacred Circle that I set up, where we meet once a month. So this is a lovely regulating activity, and we connect, we reflect, we share, and it's a great space for all of us. So I'll put the link to that below the video, as well as the link to the Identity Alchemy with AI that I mentioned, where you can learn to use AI as an identity coach and create the life that you really want to live. Other than that, over and out. I'll see you soon.